Welcome to the Sideline Live podcast. Subscribe for more episodes and follow our social media at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Daniel Warwick. Daniel is an S&C coach and director of training at Vive Fitness Lakeshore in Canada. We had an interesting discussion about high performance versus high performing and his role as an S&C coach with the Underage Irish International basketball squads. Hi Daniel, thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
So can you give a little bit of background for the listeners and who you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So if anyone who doesn't know me, and I'm sure majority of people won't know who I am, that's pretty straightforward. I'm an S&C coach or a rehab specialist, personal trainer, whatever way you want to look at it. I think everyone's kind of a hybrid coach these days anyway.
Yeah.
I have an MSc in coaching and exercise science, a BSc in LIT, from LIT in strength and conditioning. Most recently, in the kind of S&C side of the world, I was very much involved in basketball, pretty much from every level, all the way up from schools right up to the international teams, and I'm sure we'll get into that. In most recent years, I moved to Toronto in 2019, I guess now. Feels a lot longer, obviously, because 2020 was not exactly a year to live in a city. Since then, I've kind of come over to work over here in more the commercial side of things. So obviously, it's more financially viable to do that than to stay in amateur sports in Ireland. And since then, kind of moved into running a gym over here, what we call the role is called a director or training role. If that means anything to anybody, it's basically hiring, firing, continuing education, overlooking training of all the people. I was born in England, hence the dodgy accent, even though I spent the majority of my life in Ireland. And that's pretty much it. I moved to Ireland when I was about 8 years old and went to college, worked in performance, and then moved over here. And that's pretty much my story.
Deadly. What sparked you to kind of take that pathway in college and get involved in teams and S&C?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I moved over from England to Ireland, they put me in the same, I think my mum put me in the same class as my brother so we wouldn't be alone, but I was a year ahead. So I finished my leaving cert at 16 and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no clue whatsoever. So at 16, I was really interested in sports, really interested in training, and it kind of came from there. I took 1 year out. I actually wanted to be a teacher originally, and then I realized that I didn't enjoy school or kids, so I was like, maybe teacher ain't the best idea for me. No. And so I went into LIT and never really looked back from there. Generally, I just wanted to do something that I thought I'd enjoy doing. I didn't realize how much of a struggle being an S&C coach is at the time. You think when you're going into it, you're going to be, this is going to be amazing, but it's any S&C coach you'll talk to, it's definitely an uphill slog. That's pretty much it. I was very young, right? At 16, you don't know what you want to do. But that's why I went into it, and just a basic interest in sport and training people.
Class. And what was the undergrad in? Was it Limerick? What course was that?
It's LIT Furless and Tipperary, so it's a strength and conditioning course.
Very good.
It's only about 7 years old now, I guess. When did I graduate?
Yeah, because I haven't really heard of them before.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. I think I graduated in 2017. That was the third year of it, so it must have started around 2011, 12, I guess, maybe.
Okay.
But they produced quite a lot of good coaches at it. It's an amazing facility, and the course is getting better and better. Maybe we didn't get the best of it because it was a new course, and you can see. I always keep an eye on the modules that they do now and how that all works out. And it does seem to be getting better and better and better. So that's something I wish maybe I'd gone now rather than then, but rather than being in the teasing out phase. But that's where I end up doing my undergrad anyway.
Yeah. And did you get the chance to go in with teams then during your undergrad? Is that kind of how you got involved with Basketball Ireland?
Yeah, I made some big mistakes in how much I decided I wanted to do in my undergrad. Right. Honestly, I to this day will never be able to explain how it happened. But I went from my third year of my undergrad working with a high school or secondary school, sorry, too long in North America now, a high school basketball team, and then within about a year and a half, I had 2 international women's teams.
Oh, right, okay.
In my final year of college, and as well as doing my dissertation, and I was drowning.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
So I worked in a ton of sports. Yeah, I worked in rugby. Did I work in rugby? No, I didn't work in rugby. Rugby's one of the only ones I didn't work in. I worked with rugby players, but not actually in any team setting. I worked in some Gaelic football, it was okay. I don't think my accent went over crazy well, to be honest. Worked in some athletics, and then we all had placement in our third year of college, so was in a kind of gym setup then, training athletes out of that. But you get a good, there is a lot. That's the best thing about having amateur sports is they are looking for coaches that don't cost that much money. So when you're an undergrad, you can get in and get some roles going if you needed to, you know.
Definitely. And how did you get involved then with the Basketball Ireland squad?
It's a good question, and we'll probably get into, like, you know, what it all means in relation to. I know we're going to talk about performance today, but I started. My old woodwork teacher was a big basketball coach that really enjoyed it and was quite high level. Still to this day, even though it was a school team, one of the highest level coaches I've worked with in how he explains and understands and, you know, relates to the kids he's working with, and that's probably the teacher in him as well, right? So I went and worked with him for a year. Then he got a job as an interregional coach, went and did the interregionals with him. And then I got some work at one of the interregional tournaments, I think 2016, 17, I guess now. I can't remember exactly. Carl Kilbride, who was the head coach of the Irish Under-15 women's team at the time, came over and asked me would I like to interview. Me and my brother's also an S&C coach, so we did that one together. From working with Carl, I ended up working with Maeve Coleman. I don't know if you know who Maeve is. She's a female coach, and she was taking the Irish Under-20 women's team. So I ended up doing that, and yeah, it all kind of rolled over from there. A lot of luck, an awful lot of luck, right place, right time kind of thing. And probably, to be perfectly honest, probably too much too soon. I was 21 years old coaching an Irish Under-20 female basketball team, which obviously isn't ideal. I didn't have the experience really I probably needed, but the only way to get experience is by doing those things, right? So
exactly, absolutely.
That's how it kind of rolled out.
Very good. And what was that like working with your brother then? How'd you find out?
Yeah, we're good. It's good. You know what?
You're still on speaking terms.
just about. It's funny. He moved to Sydney, and he does pretty much the exact same job I do here in Toronto, but he just does it on the other side of the world. But there is a little bit of it's a little bit beautiful being able to argue with someone and realize that, you know, like, you can really hash things out and go, look, it's not going to be the end of the world. It can also definitely not be great either. But, definitely. His girlfriend as well, I should give her a mention. She was part of the team as well. We're actually a pretty, we're a family of coaches. It seems that way now, I guess. But yeah, no, there's pros and cons to everything, right? But it worked well because we were able to, if we had any disagreements, you know, you can't fall out with your brother forever, right? So it's that's it.
And how did you find that first kind of experience working with that under-20 team?
Yeah, I found the under-20 team tough, to be honest. Mostly because I didn't have the, you know, you can have the knowledge, you can be in finishing your final year, or you can understand how, you know, physical attributes work and, you know, aero capacity and all these kind of things. But it's the kind of thinking on your feet that you need more than most, right? It's like you can get away with a lot by faking it till you make it, you know. But we went to Israel, right, for the European Championships, which is a long way from home to go for your first 2 weeks abroad to the kind of a big, like I said, a European Championship. And little things, like I always talk about the example of, we were doing anything we can to get the girls recovered day by day. And we had quite good facilities, but we didn't have amazing facilities, and we were using kind of slightly simple, like, ice baths in the evening. But because it was like 50 degrees over there, you'd have to run the bath at like 10 a.m. in the morning for the water not to be coming out boiling hot, right? And you couldn't get enough ice to get the water cold. Like, it's all these things that I should have just scrapped it, right? But I pushed through it. It took so much of my time, you know.
Oh God.
There's all these little things you learn while you're away. But honestly, honestly, it was a great experience, and I'm really glad I'd done it. I maybe wish I'd done it a couple of years later, but then that led on to, honestly, helping me do a better job, and without sounding arrogant, like a slightly better job with the next team with Carl, because Carl's team was a 2-year program, and my team was a 6 months program, maybe. So by the time my second Europeans came around, I got actual experience of what was going to go on, and it was a lot easier at that point, you know.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's kind of with anything really, you could put that down to. And I always find you could have all the theoretical knowledge, but it's putting that into practice is sometimes the hardest bit. Like, you think you know, like, you might know everything, but if you can't put that into practice and, like, take into account, like, the fact that in Israel the water is really hot, you know what I mean? Like, that's little things that you're never going to learn in college, like, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. And like, it'll go on to, I know we're going to, like I said, we're going to talk about high performance, and we'll go on to that in a minute. And there's a lot of stories I can tell you about that go into what high performance actually is, and whether it really exists at amateur level or it doesn't exist at amateur level. And it's little things like that, right? But yeah, for sure, we'll get into all that.
Yeah, I want to ask about before we move on to that, was you mentioned there was 3 years coaching.
Yeah.
What was was there much benefit having it more of yous in, or would have been?
For sure.
Yeah,
And
okay.
it will literally go into everything I'm going to talk about a little bit. I honestly, they say many hands make light work, right?
Yeah.
And that's extremely true when you're dealing with something as fragile as an athlete, right?
Absolutely.
Or an absolute bunch of athletes, right? And like if you can have someone who, if you have 3 coaches that can put in 5 hours a week each, that's 15 hours, rather than the one coach who, first of all, 5 hours that are a fresher approach than the one coach who puts in 15 hours a week or whatever like that. And you got to remember, like, in most sports in Ireland, it's all amateur for the most part, unless you're maybe at a few decent level soccer teams or the 4 provinces in rugby, right? They are very good, and they're probably the closest to, a high performance kind of setup that you're going to see in Ireland. So you have to find ways of at least trying to, achieve that somehow. And then, I think the first day I sat down with Carl, or the first training session, there was, and then we'll get into this again in a minute, but there was 7 or 8, 9, 10 coaches there and 36 athletes. So you're dealing with 36 athletes that all need not maybe the most individual approach at 15 years old, but they also need fresh eyes and people looking over them and understanding what they need to do to progress.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And when we're going to get into that performance bit now, do you have a specific definition of high performance?
I do and I don't, right?
Okay.
Which is literally, I could give you the Oxford Dictionary of a high performance organization, which is just like an organization that achieves results that are exceedingly better than those of its peer group. And they say it's over like a period of time, and they say it's by focusing on a disciplined way and what really matters to that organization.
Yeah.
Or I could say to you, it's just performing at the highest level, right? It's either or, right?
Yeah.
But what underpins that is, and what people forget, is that you have to try and develop a high performance culture. And honestly, I don't think I've ever really worked in a very sustainable high performance culture. And why that is, in my opinion anyway, and my opinion could mean absolutely nothing. And I maybe shouldn't swear on this, but I probably will a little bit, and I apologize in beforehand. But like for me, like a high performance instructor is, how can you achieve results for like a cost effective manner, which is sustainable and repeatable at like every level of a pathway? How can you do that? Because if you can't do that, then you aren't developing high performance culture. You can have a very high performing culture, and I think that's exactly what HE Basketball Ireland is. Some very, very good results. And I'm not the biggest GA head. I don't know a whole lot, but I'm sure there's some aspects of teams that achieve well and that maybe could do it for a year or two, but not sustain it, right? And I think for me, one of the most key words there is like a cost effective manner, right? Because if it's not cost effective, it will never be sustainable and it will never be repeatable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. With because there's obviously big conversations around funding with Basketball Ireland. Like obviously there's issues there, and they don't have the resources due to sponsorship and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually, to be honest, a little bit of me is stayed away from everything last year. It's like I've still been working with the majority of athletes that I used to work with and kind of doing what I can, but I've kind of turned a blind. Once I left the organization, I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a blind eye and just kind of take a separation from it, because it was a great time, but like I wanted to move on and not dwell on the past, right? But I think if you're gonna like talk about resources, right, and funding, you have to understand what resources you need, right? So what actually affects the performance? And we'll I'll probably in a minute get into about how you measure performance, but you need to figure out what roles you need. So what people you need. So do you need a physio? Do you need a nutritionist? Do you need a psychologist? Or do you need a head coach, an assistant coach, and 2 skills coaches? Do you need an S&C coach? Yes, you do. Can you afford it? No. So how do you make that work? Well, that goes back to what we said a minute ago. Do we get free S&C coaches? And probably S&C coaches are the only ones that will probably have to put in the highest amount of effort into looking after the athletes at the level, because the nutritionist will do that, of course, but it's more, implementation of strategies. Whereas a lot of times when it comes to an S&C coach, the main role of you is to monitor their load, pretty much, to make sure they're not overtraining, undertraining, make sure they're going to be able to sustain the load of the tournament or game or whatever it is this season. So how can you do that, right? So you need to find some kind of way of convincing people, and that's what it really is convincing people to give up a lot of their time for not a lot of their money, and do it year after year and have some kind of structure set up. it's basically putting together a puzzle. I don't know if you've ever seen it as a thing called like the performance puzzle, and it breaks off into all different things. And then you have one slide and it breaks off again into another slide, and then more pieces, more pieces, more pieces, more pieces. And it ends up with just a circle and like, you know, say 40 pieces coming out of it. It's solving that puzzle, right? It's putting that back together.
Yeah.
Now, can you do that with no money? Probably not, right? Honestly. So then you go to what is high performance versus high performing. Does that make sense? So that's why I say there's maybe you can have your Oxford Dictionary definition of it, but maybe it doesn't really exist in some of the sports that we watch in Ireland, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, it does. And how do you, like, you obviously need the resources to cultivate high performance, but how do you, when you potentially don't have those resources, how do you bring that to the players and get that buy-in? Because you could have a team that are sitting in front of you that want nothing to do with this, and you could have all the resources in the world, but that doesn't matter because you don't have the buy-in.
Yeah, you beg, borrow, and steal for buy-in. That's what I always say.
I like that.
And you know, it's always the 1/3 rule. Like, I've never been in a team where every single player has wanted to be part of it. I've never been in a team where every single player hasn't wanted to be a part of it. You always have a third that are very keenly interested. You always have a third that will be, yeah, fuck it, I'll do it, and a third that, like, you know, you have to really work hard on. And a thing is, like, I mean, every coach I talk to, it's very similar. Like, they always, you know, an athlete doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And that might be, you might have more time to develop the relationships with athletes as they grow up in underage levels than you maybe do at a senior level. But you still have to take that approach as, well, if I'm asking you to do all this for me, the least I can do is put in equal, if not more effort. But they might not always see that, right? So it's a fine line. It takes time. You know, you can come in and knock the socks off people with intelligence, but if you could be the smartest person, do that presentation at the start of the season, everyone's like, this is amazing. But then if you're not getting back to them when they're emailing you, and you're not providing their programs on time, or you're not giving them feedback on what they need feedback on, then you lose. They're like, well, this guy doesn't really give a shit, you know? And that's, buy-in is the number one thing in any aspect of anything, right? And that's, you know, like I said, if they know how much you care, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to get buy-in, for sure.
Definitely. And what's that you mentioned there, the first session? What, like, if you kind of mentioned maybe a presentation, what do you do in that first session with your athletes? Like, in terms of the S&C, do you kind of show them the plan of what we're going to do and then what we're going to measure?
It really depends on the team you're with, right? Okay. So I can give you examples. So Gaelic senior teams that come in, and the head coach wants you to lay out a season, and I only ever program about 4 weeks at a time anyway. To be honest, life comes at you fast when you're an athlete. So you can plan out everything, and you can have a nice, what they call like a periodized plan. That's all these different colors, and you might never look at it again, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so I can only really go to what I've done, right? I mean, so when usually the first session on the Irish I'd say 15s, I guess it was 2017 or whatever like that. Carl brought all the parents into the room because he understood that the parents' buy-in was as important as the kids, right, at that age. And every aspect of the team, so the physio, nutritionist, S&C, head coach, skills coach, got up and did a little talk about what we were going to be requiring from not only the athletes, but from the players. Now, did we go into detail of block, block, block? No. But I have done that too. I've gone into teams. Let me think. I think the Gaelic football team, I guess, was the best one, and laid out the presentation of what I wanted week by week by week. And they're both different approaches. But once again, it just comes back to trying to gain an understanding on how to get buy-in, and showing that you are willing to put in the effort if they're willing to put in the effort, if that makes sense. Yeah,
no, it does. And I suppose, how do you, like, when you're doing, because I listened to that episode with Carl, and you were saying the testing. What are you testing for with the athletes? Is that just measuring their strength levels and their movement, or?
So yeah, that's a really good question, because it, once again, you're gonna hate me, but it depends, right?
It depends.
Everything depends. If I could, it shouldn't have said S&C coach for my degree. It should have said it depends. But yeah, like, we would measure what we thought. We would do a battery of tests, right? We would measure what we thought was needed to improve the athlete's physical attributes. Now, does that mean that actually improve their performance? Probably not, right?
Okay.
But we want to set certain standards for them, whether it be aerobically, whether it be with a power output, whether it be a strength test, whether it be, you know, So a really good example of this is, there's a thing called a functional movement screen, which is a movement-based test, and everyone loves it, hates it, whatever you want to do with it. Everyone says it can, there used to be all this thing, it can predict injury and all this, and then no, it can't, right? It generally can't. But
we can't predict if someone's going to slam into you, like
right, exactly, right, and but I still use aspects of that because I'm taking an under 15 team that needs to learn how. So one of them's an overhead squat, right? One of them's an inline lunge, one of them's some kind of hip hinge or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think I've actually done one of them before, actually. So I know what you're saying, yeah.
And people can lie to you. Like, you can lie to coaches and be like, if you don't get better at this test, then, you're going to get injured. Or I can say, well, we're doing this test because I only see you as an Irish athlete every 6 weeks, maybe every month, right? Yeah. So I need to make sure, first of all, it's a good indication to me that you're doing your programming and that you're learning how to move better, because we all know that strength levels can help in decreasing injury risk. Can it prevent injuries? Nothing can prevent an injury. But if you're teaching them the basic movement patterns that they need at an early age, it's only going to stand to them over time as they get older. And I think I did a podcast on high performance. I think it actually might have been with my brother, to be honest. And we talked about, well, why were we testing? And this is what we used to do whenever we would pick the test we would do. Well, if we're trying to develop some kind of high performance performing infrastructure and culture, then we need to first of all look like what's it going to look like for them in the future, right? It has to be some kind of long-term planning. So what do they need to be able to do? Well, they need to be able to sprint. So we need to measure their sprint speeds. We need to be able to understand how aerobically fit they need to first of all to perform at the level that we need them to perform at. But long term, if you're going to take, and this is a big thing, going back to comparing it to, and I'm spiraling, going back and forth a little bit, comparing it to my under 20 team that I took. None of them had ever really done fitness testing before, right? At that level. So we're going at the very basic level of under 15s, teaching them how to test. So what do I think are the tests that we use? And now there's a big report I've done, and it lays out exactly why we did every test, and you can go into detail, and that's just my opinion on it. A counter movement jump, a squat jump leading up to a reactive strength index. What we never did was like actual strength testing or anything like that, because we didn't have the facilities, and it wasn't sustainable and it wasn't repeatable. So if it's not, I tested, I think maybe 10 to 15 different courts and 15 halls over the years I worked at Basketball Island. Never really the same one twice. I think the only one that I ever did twice maybe St. David's out in Artane, because that's where Colester played or trained, and that's where we had access to with Carl. But if it's not, like I said, if it's not sustainable or repeatable, then is it a waste of time to test something that you're not going to be able to test over and over again and actually see any logical progression on? Probably. So that's how you pick your tests, right? But that doesn't mean that it's going to be picked at the same at every level as well, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Sure, there's no point in you getting them into the gym doing trap bar deadlifts and all these things that if you're never going to go to the gym again, like, well, that's just a waste of 20 minutes, or not 20 minutes, longer, that they could have done on the court and done something else.
Right. Of course. Yeah, you're dead right. Yeah.
I'm interested as well, because you put it down to, when you worked with that under 20 team, you put it down to maybe lack of knowledge and experience. But what I can hear from, you obviously gained from that experience, but what I'm listening to when you're talking about the under 15 team was you had longer with them. So it sounds like that relationship would have had another, like there would have been another reason for your success with them, if you know what I mean, and kind of getting on better with them because you had longer with those players.
Time always helps, right? Actually, time might not always help if you're not I've been at some teams where there's a real clash of within internal leadership, who's the head coach, who's the assistant coach, and the more time spent in that environment kills it. But if you're in a high performing culture like Carl did a really good job of setting up, then you're gonna, everyone's cohesive and everyone plans together, which is kind of putting together that puzzle. Then obviously more time you have over 2 years rather than 6 months, then you would hope otherwise you would hope that you're doing a better job, right? Otherwise it's probably malpractice, to be honest.
Yeah. And I mentioned that before, I listened to that episode with Carl, and I was really interested in measuring performance on the court, because that's something, I know in GEA it's all about the GPS trackers. Did he get his kilometers in? Did he get the 7K, whatever it is? But talk us through that. You used the heart rate monitors, was it?
Yeah. And look, GPS units are good for some things, but
Yeah,
give you what you just said there, he got his kilometers in, and he
I
worked really
know.
hard,
Yeah,
right?
oh, you've
But he
heard,
might
you
have been
hear
out of
some.
position more.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah,
He might have had a terrible game, right? So
yeah,
when you're measuring any kind of performance, you have objective measures of performance, which is
yeah,
basically the result, right? You know what I mean?
yeah.
End of the day, did we achieve what we wanted to achieve? It might not be winning, but did we only lose by 10 points? Did we win the final quarter? And then you have
Yeah,
subjective measured performance, which is basically improvement.
yeah.
So how do you measure that? Well, I don't know if you know, I'm sure you've had a lot of people in your podcast now, like a key performance indicator, right? So a KPI. You
Yeah.
start with that and you reverse engineer back from that, right? So what do we think? And to be honest, if I was to tell you exactly what they were 2 years ago, I can't really remember. It's been quite a long time.
No worries.
If I'm being honest, I maybe should have looked that up before. I have them somewhere. But whether it was, what's going to actually affect their performance? Well, being better at their sport, right? That's what's going to affect the performance. Having the ability to be efficient of movement is also really important for basketball. So we need to teach them how to do that over a 2-year period. But do you have any really, like we just talked about earlier, like, can you prevent an injury? No. Can you make someone have a good game? No. But can you put the tools in place to at least measure something objectively, like the heart rate stuff? So we would use that kind of on the sideline to see how long certain players were spending in certain zones, and then maybe give a little tap down the bench, go, she might start to fatigue in a little bit. Why don't we put her off?
So it was live then? You would give live feedback?
We'd have the iPad on the, and once again, experience, right? Sometimes, a player, they're all laid out and a player might put on the wrong heart rate monitor that's not attached to her game. So you're like, why the fuck is certain player who's sitting on the bench at like 80% right now, And that stuff you got to figure out on the fly as well. But I mean, you'd have certain ideas, and they're just ideas, right? You have certain ideas for certain players, or what you think maybe is sustainable for them at a period of time. And now none of that can work if you don't have the skillful players that you can rotate in and out, right? So if you have only 5 good players and you don't have anyone else to bring on, it all doesn't make any difference because you can't afford to take those players off the court, right? If you have enough at every position that you can rotate, and that's what we used to try to do with the heart rate monitors. And then give you example, there's so many different measures. We were huge on monitoring and recovery strategies for our players. And I know this is meant to be more of a performance podcast and getting maybe into the S&C side too much, but that for me, using that heart rate monitor to monitor, the heart rate monitors, to monitor the load of the game. So we have them subjectively, figure out how hard it was out of 10, how they're feeling, and they'd go see the physio and get some subjective data for that, but also how many minutes they spend in certain zones. And that can also be discredited in research or credited, but it's just giving me more information that I can then, okay, well, this person needs a certain recovery strategy the next day, rather than this person maybe actually can lay off. So who gets in the normal tech boots first? How can you do that?
Okay.
Who had the highest score? Who played? And it nearly always correlates with how hard they found it out of 10 and who played the most minutes. But then you can at least back it up with some kind of internal physiological response of their heart, right?
Okay. And do they, sorry to interrupt, did they score it out of 10? Was that what you were saying there?
So they would score their how hard the game was out of 10 for themselves after every game.
Okay. Like a little form kind of thing, was it?
Yeah. And the forms kind of go out the window at some point. You start asking questions and write it down in your hand. What we would do is we would weigh our players pre and post game.
Okay, right.
To see if they had lost sufficient or whatever, how much weight they had lost or they hadn't lost. And then that gave us an indication of maybe they weren't doing the best job of hydrating during the game, or how much they have to rehydrate. And I know you had Kate McDade was our nutritionist. So she would have laid out all that stuff for them. We would just take the data and refer it back there. I think Kate was one of your first guests, right? I think.
Yeah, she was. She was the first guest, second episode. But that's really interesting. Did you ever hear of? Now there was a lot of people thinking it was absolute spoof, but they did that for LeBron or something. But he was heavier after the game or something ridiculous. I don't know what you think.
The body reacts in loads of ways, right? You know, I've seen that. I've seen that quite a bit in players be heavier when they're just constantly sipping and maybe not. The game's a little bit easier for them, you know. I don't like you got to take into consideration you want them to weigh in the kit pre and post, right? But it could be completely drenched in sweat.
Exactly.
Right. You know, so you know if that's also another aspect of it. but that, like, going back to, that's when we would ask them how hard the game was out of 10, right? So maybe like that might be 10, 15 minutes after the game. You kind of want to usually get it within a half hour. So they'd come in, either like, it depends, right? Generally would always want to weigh them before they've restarted drinking water, right? So they're not, but that's not always the way it goes, and that's just learning on the job and being on the fly. If Carl comes in with some really important points that he needs to tell them straight after the game, good or bad, I'm not going to go, hold on a second, Carl.
You can wait a second.
Wait a second. Head coach over there, sit down and know your place. Okay.
We're weighing the players, Carl. Take a minute.
Yeah, for sure. No. But
that's interesting. And would you ask them anything else? Like, would you do any other, like even maybe the next day? Would you ask them many questions?
We were, over the 2 years, I developed, actually, I don't know if you, Mary Carriston, who's also a nutritionist who worked in the Irish Under 22 with me, and the physio at the time, I can't remember, it wasn't the physio we went with, but it was a physio who was working at the time. We set up like a recovery template.
Okay.
And that would have a bunch of questions and a bunch of nutritional stuff. And were they able to this, and this? And that kind of all went out the window a little bit at Europeans, if I'm being honest. That was what was done each week leading up for the 2 years to kind of get them into the habit of making sure that they have a recovery point system, that they try to hit as many recovery strategies that they have.
Yeah.
But yeah, so at like, it all becomes very subjective, and like, you know, they're sitting in their normal tech boots for half hour the next morning or the evening or whatever. You've got time to talk to them, then find out how they're getting on, what is sore. And then we would do a mobility session, nap session, and we do a monitoring counter movement jump session. So we would monitor their power production. Now, that for me, not one single part of that could really give me any sustainable information, but when I put it all together, it at least gave me a better idea than if I didn't have it, right?
Okay, yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. That's, I wouldn't, if you don't mind, actually, I might, if you send on that recovery template, I'd love to see it, even though you didn't use it at the European, but that's really interesting. And would the players kind of, like, how did they react to that recovery? Because, like, if you're coming from, let's say, like, this small club, and then you're in this Irish environment where they have Normatec boots and all this check-ins and all these different things. How did they find that difference in environment?
You got to drip feed it in. It's got to be a little bit at a time. You got to, we probably made, it was a mistake we probably made at the start. We went with a training app, which was a bit all encompassing, and it would have worked well, you know, if it was maybe at a higher age group team. But then we actually just ditched that after a couple of months and started just basically doing Excel sheets and send them on a Saturday morning, and the parents and the kid would fill them out on a Sunday evening and send them back. But yeah, I think the first thing we introduced, obviously, what we actually is just monitoring their workload. So how many sessions they did a week, what sessions that was, how long it was, and how hard it was out of 10. And then I've got 2 years of data on players every week, what they've done, and you can see how high certain people's loads are, how low certain people's loads are. So that's what we started with. And then we would I would talk to the psychologist, that's who was also on the recovery template, that's who I forgot. No,
you're all good.
Colin. That's what I couldn't remember. But so then we drip things. I would talk to Colin. I go, well, when do you think is a good time to add in this, and what questions would you like on it? Well, then I talk to the nutritionist. Well, how much do they know about nutrition yet? Would they even understand some of these questions? Do they have enough knowledge of what the recovery things they need? Because if I'm only seeing them once every 6 weeks, you're only seeing them once every 6 weeks. So your presentation is the same as me only seeing them. And you can have, of course, constant contact during it, but they also need to have the certain levels of education to take in the data. And they're like there's that 1/3 rule. You'll get that 1/3 that will put in all the effort and do it absolutely. And you know what? It's probably the only team I've really worked on where maybe that just kind of shows how much Carl puts into hard work and effort and stuff like that, which are all buzzwords to me. I don't know if any of it actually really exists, but the players that put in the time, I would say, right, to put in the time, and because it has to be less than 10 minutes to fill out a form, otherwise a kid won't do it. An athlete, an adult won't do it at the end of the day, right? It has to be like, everything has to be within 10 minutes, right? So people who gave us the most data, and we were able to relay that back to everyone else, they kind of end up being the final 12 that made it to Europeans, to be honest, bar maybe an exception of 1 or 2, which is always an exception.
It's like the way I think of it is, I don't know if you heard the quote, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you, I'm going to go back to the heart rate monitors, but I want to ask there, you mentioned, what was that role of the psychologist in terms of those questions? What did he want added in?
Do you know what? Yeah, it's a really good question.
You don't know, do you?
No, I have it. I've used it for years. But he would want to know their mood state, right? I can't remember the exact questions, to be honest.
Okay.
Because he sent them over to me. I fitted them into a point system, and I actually gave them probably the most. It was out of 100 points. I think they would have had the highest points. So I think they would have maybe 40 of the points were going to psychology, and 30 nutrition, S&C questions or recovery strategies or whatever. Okay. So he would all about, did they do their visualization technique? Did they do this, that, whatever? How was their mood state? Did anything affect their mood? How was school, right?
Yeah.
We deal with underlay. Was there something that we're seeing a constant pattern of? Because that's a big thing of overtraining as well. You have your workload, you have your performance. Because it's that big thing. Is it overtraining or underperformance, right? Because they're not too, they're like love and hate. They're not crazy emotions that are very far apart. Underperformance and overtraining aren't very far apart. So
yeah.
He would have used, and this is to the best of my memory. Like I said, it's been about a year since I was out of it, to be honest. Yeah. And I've probably in preparation, I probably should have looked over it.
That's all good. No worries, no problem.
But yeah, it would have been about their mood state. Was anything going on in their life? How was school? Were they enjoying school? Was something along those lines in a way more smart or better worded way of putting it.
Yeah.
Most psychologists will always have that, right?
You mentioned there visualization.
Yeah.
That's since kind of getting into podcasts and starting podcasts, that's a really big, not common factor, but it just seems like every couple of people just scream about visualization and they really enjoy it. Would those players have done a lot of that, or have you seen particular? It doesn't have to be that squad in particular. But
I've seen a lot of it. Yeah, I've seen a lot of it at the higher level players for sure. One of the highest level players I ever saw play. We won't mention names, obviously, but and I was part of a squad with her. She was. We were talking about visualization, so I'm guessing at that point there must have been something said within the squad or something practiced in the squad at that point. And she's like, "No, I don't do that. No, I don't do that. No, I don't do that. I would never do that." And then a couple of minutes before the game, she's in the corner visualizing free throws. And the psychologist looks at me and goes, she just doesn't know what it means then. Never do that, but 2 minutes later you're doing it on the court before you go play a game. So it comes back to that education of it as well, right? But I've seen a lot of it. And you do see that, right? It's anything you can do to make things a little bit easier, right?
Exactly.
At a better standard.
Yeah. And would they have used, I know she was, that particular player you mentioned, she would have been just sitting down, probably eyes closed, doing whatever, listening to music. Because I don't know if you've read Toughness by Jay Billis, it's really good. But he mentioned Steve Kerr, and two things he did was, when he was taking a free throw really early on in his career, he was in Houston and he hit a really good shot that was bang on the money, couldn't have done anything better. And then throughout his career, then he would, every time he went to free throw, he'd say Houston. So he had that mental trigger of the visualization. And then as well, before a game, he would watch clips of himself. So then he would kind of the way, if you see it, you'll do it kind of way.
Yeah. It's a huge thing, right? I mean, I remember we did a lot of sports psychology in my master's degree, which was a coaching science and exercise one, which was very much based a lot more on psychology and stuff like that. We did a lot of things that went straight over my head, if I'm being perfectly honest. But the marginal gains you can make in some things versus a 1% gain versus a 10% gain. I think there's a lot to be said for what you can gain in some psychological stuff when it comes to visualization and all these kind of things. And we'll probably I'm going to talk a bit about that in a minute anyway, but they're finding ways of improving your performance at the least cost to your body is also a really good way of looking at it.
I like that.
It doesn't take a whole lot. I mean, everyone's different, but it doesn't take a whole lot of energy for you to visualize something, rather than having to do that extra bit of aerobic capacity work or alactic work or something like that,
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask about the heart rate monitor, because I remember you had it must have been that squad, it was with Carl, and you were mentioning that there was a particular player that maybe wasn't performing to the level, and the kind of, because you had the data, you could sit down to the player, but look, let's say it's me, look, Orla, you're not really pushing yourself, you're not really giving it your all, what's going on?
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. Once again, I doubt we mentioned names, because I doubt.
No, you didn't. Yeah, I wasn't even sure which squad it was.
Yeah, it was definitely, yeah, it would have definitely, and Andrew Gill, it might have been with Andrew Gill as well. I don't know if you listened
It
to the
could have been.
podcast.
Yeah, I
Yeah, because
did.
he was part of that squad
I
too.
could be
Yeah.
mixing some of the episodes up. Yeah.
If I can't remember it, there's no hope you can remember it, what podcast it is. But yeah, you're right. It makes conversations easier when you have data,
Yeah.
right? And it's so subjective, even though it's objective data. You just know this player over a period of time. I'd been on multiple all across the world with this player. I'd seen her perform she was a post and very aggressive post. And when she's aggressive and plays at that slightly higher heart rate because she's working harder, she plays better. Right.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen every single time. But I could be getting the games mixed up, but I think the first game, excellent. And we had a very high heart rate score, in the times that she was on the court, we're really working hard, being aggressive, putting herself out there, doing the things she needs to do. And then 2 bad games. But I can even go back to, it was the main source of the data that was easy enough to use was she played really well. We went to Denmark, I think it was, or we went to Copenhagen to play Denmark. And once again, now we had 4 games at an international standard playing against an international team. And we had more than 4 games, but that's just what comes to my head. Or 5 games, 6 games, whatever it was, that we can compare and go to, okay, it might not work on everyone, but it seemed to work on her. Okay, well, we know when you put more effort in, you do better. Yeah. Would you not want to do better? Is it something you're telling us that you maybe can't put the effort in? And effort, once again, I don't even know if that really word exists. And, it's all, everything depends. That worked in that instance. She had a really good rest of the tournament and all her rates and zones went up. Does that happen all the time? I really doubt it.
Yeah.
Does it help that I had quite a good relationship and Carl had quite a good relationship with that player? And we had quite a good, it was a very nice squad to be a part of, to be honest, one of my favorite squads of all time. Yeah. Yes, that helped for sure. If someone has their back up against you already, and that can happen, that 1/3 rule, that might not work as well. But that is that high performance or is that high performing? Because is that sustainable? Is that repeatable? Is it cost effective? Well, the heart rate monitor we got on for about, I don't know, €60 each. We bought the iPad out of pocket. We had one anyway, or like my brother bought one. Can every team afford to get 36 heart rate monitors? Probably not. But can the final 12 can? Yeah, probably. A bit of fundraising. So that might be sustainable, repeatable. Can you then say, over a period of time, we do 10 years of work, we have all these heart rate zones from certain players at certain international tournaments at certain age groups, then we can start comparing back and start to build an athletic profile for these players. Yes, we can. Is it happening? No. So is it high performance or high performing? Well, that was a high performing culture, was not a high performance culture. Does that make sense?
I like that. Yeah, no, I like the way you're putting that. And going back to what you were saying about the player who didn't know they were doing visualization. Education, as in, like I was saying on another podcast, as a player sometimes I struggle to be consistent and to give 100% effort every time. Not just me being open and honest with everyone, but if, let's say, for example, I've never worn like a heart rate monitor, or I've worn a GPS thing once, and that was really interesting because a couple of the players, a couple of my teammates did as well, so you could see like, well, that girl actually had an extra not kilometer, but she had that extra bit on me. Oh right, okay, I need to really put that in. But maybe, let's say, for example, I'm just using myself as an example, if I wore a heart rate monitor at training and I did my usual performance, geez, you know what, and I'd realise, kind of looking at it, God, I could go an extra bit because I'm not even in the red zone at this stage, and I think I'm pushing myself hard, like.
Yeah, and that's the athlete's mentality, right? That might not be the best thing, honestly. Like, we'll get like, the understanding and education is the most important thing. And this is all, like you said earlier, about drip feeding. I don't think we got the heart rate monitors to the second year of the program, mostly because obviously the lower
funding.
number of players, funding, right? I think we started with 5, I think, and then we would only put them on. So if we went away. Am I right in thinking we had 5 when we went to Denmark, maybe, and we put them on certain players that we wanted to really kind of have a look at, and then we'd make sure that there was obviously every player got a go on it. But we kind of made better ideas of people at that point who may be going to European Championships and stuff like that. So for me, everyone got to wear one at least once, right? But obviously, if players are going to play more minutes, then they probably should wear them and stuff like that. But it's the athlete's mentality is always, for the most part, like they'd always want to improve. They always want to be, if they actually care, right?
If they actually that's care. The biggest thing.
And some of them do, some of them don't. So you've got to be very careful, not only that what information you give them, but how you educate them on that information. Because certain players will go, oh, certain players have a really good game, really easy game, and have a low heart rate, right? Say it comes back to that GPS and being out of position versus being in position. And now GPS works really, really well, but it's like, once again, do you understand what you're looking at? Are you looking at total distance? Why are you looking at total distance? It's like, are you looking at it because, my coach told me that I need to run 10K a game? Or did my coach say to you, okay, well, in your position, and I don't know anything about Gaelic football, right, or anything like that, even though I grew up in Kerry. No idea, right?
All the people from Kerry won't be impressed now. They'll be like, finish, turn it off.
Don't worry about that. My accent already says I don't know anything about Gaelic football. But like, it could be like, how many high-speed runs did you do? Did you perform more high-speed runs? Well, the position that we have data on for you over 10 years says most of the time, if you're having a tough game, you're going to be doing these many high-speed runs.
So I wanted to talk to you about, we kind of had a little bit of chat before about non-negotiable, and I sent that video. It's of Frank Lampard on the High Performance podcast. If anyone hasn't seen it, you should go watch it. But it was kind of that non-negotiable, non-acceptable behaviours of players in a high-performing culture.
Yeah, and my thing is, I don't think anything is non-negotiable. I really don't. Which is probably a weird thing to say, because we talk about all the things that we need from players to create the culture. But at the end of the day, and now this goes to more to overage senior players than it does underage players, right? Life is all about negotiation, right? In any aspect of it. Now, of course, you're going to there's going to be certain things that are, give you something's illegal or blatantly, of course, that is non-negotiable. But that's probably not what we're talking about. There's still behaviors, but we're talking about what's probably going to impact the performance rather than put them in jail, right? So
that's more about the non-acceptable behaviors. You know what I mean? Because for example, if you're with, let's say, Carl's team, just an example, I don't know who's setting what, but Carl would the coaching staff would set, like, there's the rules of basketball have those non-negotiables because it's illegal to travel, for example. But Carl would put out the non-acceptable behaviours that we're going to have as a team. Like, for example, Frank Lampard spoke about hard work. His first thing was work, or was it work ethic or something? He said, if you're not working hard, see you later.
And I disagree. Honest, I disagree, because if you look back to what John Terry said, and just keep on a Chelsea vibe, right? Eden Hazard was their worst trainer by a landslide, but yet their best player on a Saturday. So where do the best managers find a way of making sure? That's what he said. Sorry to cut across. What he was saying, you kind of have to balance having, like, let's say, like, his thing was like, don't be late to training, but if your man shows up 10 minutes late but you're playing in a final on Saturday, you can't be like, look, we're not playing you because you were 10 minutes late to training, and then you throw the match. Like, so now you're negotiated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
so it's no longer a non-negotiable behavior. Like, if somebody is an absolute arsehole on a Friday evening and like, everyone's been in teams where people argue and stuff like that, and maybe people cross the line. If it's really important for them to play on the Saturday, everyone's got to suck it up and go for a play on the Saturday, right? Because at the highest level, right? I mean, of course,
it's different for every stage. Obviously,
when you're younger levels, you're trying to form human beings as well as just athletes, right? That's a huge thing that people forget. A physio once said to me, he doesn't deal with injuries, he deals with human beings, and that's very, very true. I
like that,
right? Pendulum Physio, actually, in Northern Ireland, should probably give him a shout out. He's got a good podcast too, actually. Happy Healthy Humans.
To know.
So I don't think anything is non-negotiable. Non-acceptable for sure. But non-negotiable. Like, even people, he talked about work ethic and respect. Okay, I mean, yes, respect on the pitch is very important. But I've worked in teams where people hated each other and did not respect each other, but were still successful. And once again, it's not the highest level that I've worked in or anything like that, but I've seen it, right? And I think that a respect for how good someone is not maybe a respect for them as a person. So when Frank Lampard is an absolute genius and has been around high performance his whole life and has some very interesting things to say on it. And I'm not disagreeing with a single word he said, because work ethic is super important. But is it non-negotiable? I don't think so. I think it's very negotiable. The only thing you will see is someone like Eden Hazard, who's now moved to Real Madrid and is constantly injured. Well, is that because there wasn't the work ethic? That was the thing he needed to sustain his career properly.
Yeah, because the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So if he wasn't pushing
the
himself,
way you do everything,
there you go. So because if he wasn't pushing himself in the pitch, maybe was he not pushing himself in the weight room? And does that mean he wasn't strong enough? I know you can't prevent injuries, but if you're stronger, you might.
You can definitely reduce the risk of injuries. I can tell you that right now. There is a lot you can do to reduce the risk of an injury, but you cannot prevent it. I mean, I had an athlete, so many athletes that you do so much ankle stability work, especially basketball players and all this kind of stuff. They got for a layup, they land on someone else's foot who's also at a weird position. And you can have, they get stronger, and over time, does it prevent the injury? Maybe it prevents the length of the injury.
Okay.
Right, they can recover a little bit faster because they were able to absorb more force on the way down because they're stronger, or be able to produce more force on the way up. But does it prevent injury? Nothing prevents injury. You can get in a car crash in the morning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a good one actually. Sorry, because you just mentioned there about the ankle thing. ACL. Yes, you can strengthen everything around the ACL, but if you're still going to tear your ACL. But I remember I was chatting to someone or I was listening to, I can't remember. I get so confused with listening to everything and chatting to people. But it was they had torn their ACL, but because they had their muscles in such good shape, they could go to surgery straight away. Because you know the way if you tear your ACL, you have to build it up and then go for surgery.
Yeah, but once again, it depends, right? So I worked with a guy for a 9-month ACL rehab who was in amazing shape.
Yeah.
Actually was one of the few Gaelic footballers I ever worked with. But he had lost so much muscle mass because he was waiting on a surgery. So why was he waiting on a surgery? I can't remember exactly what the reason was, but that was a real hard rehab for him because he was, and I don't know if you know, of course you know Brianna, she was on last week.
Yeah, she was on Takeover. Yeah.
She'll give you more information on that because she's really in the heart of it, of building back to levels of what they need to do between, their left and right leg if they have torn an ACL. I think she was talking about 10% is what she was saying they need to get back to, or using a nice kinetic strength machine or whatever, whatever they use up there, and movements and stuff like that. But yeah, of course, there's a point of diminishing returns in everything in life. But if you're stronger, faster, and can move better, you're going to be more efficient with your energy, which probably means that you're going to be less tired, less fatigued in the brain, which means you're probably going to be better at the skill of your sport. Your overwhelming memory capacity is going to be in a better position if you're not fatigued, right? Doesn't mean it's going to prevent injury.
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. I want to ask you about that actually. In any of the teams you were involved in, it doesn't have to be Carl's team, it could be any of them, were there any of those like specific non-acceptable behaviours or values that the team had, and how were they implemented?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. From me, nothing was ever from in the S&C point. I can't really speak for Carl. There was definitely also, it's a bit different when you're dealing with underage players because they're late because maybe their parents didn't get out of bed in time, or there was traffic on. A lot of it's traveling a long way to go. But I remember I was working with a team once, and it was Paddy's Day, and we were training on Paddy's Day, and then the next night all the players put in their session log reports or whatever, and they all had 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and we were meant to be training again the next day, right? I was like, what are they up? Like, that might be a non-negotiable, non-acceptable kind of behavior you might put in. That's but at the same time, as long as they get a training session in and no one gets injured, look, they're allowed to have fun too. They're not professional athletes.
Yeah, exactly.
When it comes to underage, you're probably like I said, you're trying to form good patterns that's going to help them when they go into their senior career, whether that ends up in basketball, whether that ends up with females getting a D1 scholarship and going over, or a D2 scholarship, or whatever they can achieve, right? Then go over to America, and you want them to have an idea of what is acceptable, what is non-negotiable, say, or negotiable, right? And that's what you're doing. But that would all been run by Carl. But for me, I give you an example. I always wanted the S&C stuff within the international weekends to be a little bit of a break from the serious stuff for them, because I wanted them to come over, have a laugh, and not be overly concerned about, I'm a pretty calm, relaxed coach as it is. I'm never going to shout at anyone. I'm never going to happen. I'm going to talk to you like you're a and just have some fun, right? Because they have so many stressful scenarios going on the skill side of the sport. If I'm adding to their stress and anxiety, that is, once again, it's like malpractice, right? And it's probably times that you do, because I know players feeling sick about so nervous about having to do fitness testing, right? And then you would see certain players, we'd all got them to put their heart rate monitors on when we're doing the fitness testing to get their aerobic capacity, and they can match it back to their maximal heart rate and stuff like this and see where they fell. But I used to start realizing, why don't I just put them on from the start of the fitness testing and seeing whose heart rate spikes when they went and go do a test in front of everybody, or a CMJ. And you see certain players that get really high heart rate zones doing something that shouldn't cause a heart rate zone because they're so anxious about what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
I know that kind of goes off whatever we were just saying, but it's
but
that's
that's interesting. Right? Yeah, because you don't particularly maybe think of those. Like like as a coach, like I'm lucky, I'm coaching Gaelic football at an underage level, and because I'm a I play Gaelic football and I've played underage, I kind of understand that, you know, as a player, when I'm whatever age they are, do I want to be called out in front of everyone and demonstrate? Like, it could be the coach could see that as a really good thing. Like, I want to demonstrate a solo. You're brilliant at solos. Let's demonstrate to everybody. But inside, I could be like, oh God, I have to do this in front of everyone. And like you were saying, that could show up on a heart rate monitor. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. And like, you know, anxiety is a real thing, right? Anxiety is a real thing, you know, like people, you know, I always give an example. People go, oh, I took 2 weeks off from running and then I felt so unfit. And I go, no, you're not unfit. You didn't lose all your aerobic capacity in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks.
You're like, oh shit, I haven't run in 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, what am I doing? I can't do this. This is horrible. And your heart rate spikes. And then that's why you're a little bit more tired, right?
Yeah.
I always wish, there's one thing I always wish I could see. I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2016, Mo Farah fell over during his either 10,000 or 5,000 meter race that he won gold in. And I would love to see how he controlled that heart rate, because he did like a full roly-poly and got back up again. And it was towards the end of the race. And I think that must have spiked his heart rate. And when you're talking about the finest lines of heart rate training and, you know, a 10,000 meter or 5,000 meter, that's going to be them, right? That's something I always wish I'd seen. But yeah, it all has its place. Right.
Yeah, well, he's a good guest to get on your podcast.
Yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And talking about kind of players and that kind of, you can't really measure maybe the psychological side sometimes. In your experience, would have been much worry about injury with certain players, or would that just tend to be with the players that have been injured before?
So yeah, I think the number one, you hit the nail on the head. The number one thing for re-injury is, you know, for injury is re-injury, right? Usually, right? And that's why the first things we ever done. And there's so many things that you could talk about it all day, right? But there's so many things that go into it. Psychologically, yeah, I think so. But also there's both sides to that. I think there's certain players at certain age groups, at senior right down to underage, that don't mind being injured on the big events because there's no pressure on them anymore. Or, you know, if we're doing a 3-day international camp, you might see a player start to look at it on a Saturday evening. And I'm not saying that this actually happened, but obviously I'm not saying this actually happened, but it could have happened, right? In quotation marks, right? You don't know, right? You can't measure that psychologically. But some of them would rather sit out the game against each other in front of all their parents, maybe on a Sunday evening, right? Because they don't want to be shown up. And they can not. I don't think everything's psychological, right? Everything's subjective. But they can lean on that crutch a little bit if someone's had an ACL, and some players are the complete opposite. And that comes down to literally, like you said, you can't really measure psychological stuff. If you could, you'd make a lot of money, I think.
You would.
People do try, but I don't know. I don't even think you could really measure effort, to be honest. So I don't know.
How did those players that kind of get over that, like, and just, like, I'm thinking of, you won't know her, but there's an example of a Gaelic footballer and she came back better than she was before.
Okay.
How do this, like, I'm sure you might know of someone in a different sport that's done that. How did they combat that, and how do they go out and not have that little voice in the back of their head, oh, don't do that because you're going to do your ACL again, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Some people take it as time lost as the biggest motivator, right? And some people go, I can, and, you know, end of the day, if you have a solid rehab and you have good people around you and you have enough data, that will ease your anxiety, or it could boost your anxiety, you know. But if you have no information, say I know a girl, I don't know her personally, actually, an ex-girlfriend of mine was a soccer player, and she was telling me about this girl who tore her ACL on the left leg, tore her ACL on the right leg, and then tore her ACL again on the left leg.
I think I know who you're talking about. She plays for Ireland.
This girl's in America.
So never mind. Well, there's a girl who plays for Ireland that has a very similar story to that. But yeah.
And the one thing I found interesting was, like, the first thing you think of is like, oh, shit rehab, right? Definitely shit rehab. But then this girl's mum was a physical physio and athletic therapist for a really high level team in America. So I'm assuming the rehab was at least of a decent standard.
Decent enough. Like,
yeah, you'd hope so, right? It's like, not giving a shit about your kids, right? But and I could be also misremembering that story a little bit. It's been a long time, but it always stood with me. Like, you can just reduce the risk of injury. That's all you can do. And if you can get the players educated through, having a decent sports psychologist who deals with those kind of issues with them, once again, completely out of my realm, to be honest, that's got to be done at every stage. And I think I actually asked Brianna about this when she was on my podcast. I had a similar question that you just did. I have seen players come back stronger, for sure. I have. I've seen some really, really, really. I've seen players who I would have maybe, and this is a terrible thing to say, but like flaky psychologically, I mean, that can happen. Everyone has those stages. Get stronger from it and become better players.
Because you mature. You mature when you're injured, whether it's through not like watching your peers play and be like, God, I really need to, buckle up here and put the work in and get back. But what was it? You've seen those players come back stronger. How did they come back stronger? What did they do?
There's a few things. Obviously, that, like we said, their rehab's really important. Their commitment to rehab, their understanding of the time they've now lost in relation to what they need to do to tie it back. But a big thing that people don't talk about is when you're on the sidelines a lot, right? You probably get almost a completely different perspective of the game.
You do.
Right? If you're a high level player, like, you hear what the coach is trying to implement, but you're also seeing why it's not happening because you're not very single minded. You see the team. So whether that's, that's what probably makes the biggest difference, I think. I mean, I can remember sitting with a girl who had a slight Achilles issue. I think, once again, can't remember what tournament. There's been so many. But she said, I never understood. One of the things, it's always stood with me. I never understood what my coach was trying to say until I was out. And she was telling me, I heard her say it to someone else, go, oh, that's what she meant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. No, I know what you're saying. As I was saying, because I'm coaching, but injury is kind of, when you're a player, you kind of have this like tunnel vision. When you're injured, it's kind of, you can start to look maybe in the side mirrors, but when you're coaching, like if you look at it as a car, you can see out the front, you can see the side mirrors, and you can see the rear view mirror. You can see everything. You've nearly got a full 360 view. And for me, even if I never step foot again and never play sport again, which at the moment I'm not putting myself under pressure to do because that's how I'm coping with my injury, I know I will be a better player because I have that bigger view. And I'm not saying I know everything, but I can hear the coach say, do this, and now I understand why, and I'm not in my head like, what is he going on about? Why would I pass it that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's so true. And like I said, it all comes back to having the right people around you, right? So a decent sports psychologist, a decent rehab guy, but none of that makes as much of a difference, to actually being really good at your sport, right? And being exceptional and having a deeper understanding of your sport. And I think that might be, we all get caught up in the nitty gritty of trying to do everything when you have like marginal gains versus maximal gains, right? And something like that could have a way bigger impact than all the rehab. Of course, they have to get back on the pitch. Of course, they have to get back on the court. Of course, but for the most part, that will happen. If they're at a decent standard, they'll get the rehab they deserve, right? Not everywhere, but for the most part. I think there's a lot to be said for getting a better understanding of the game from a different perspective and being able to take coaching cues on during a game in high tense, high pressurized environments that are going to make you a better player for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there. I want to ask a little bit about the S&C. We've touched on a bit of it. As a nation, or I don't want to be specific to basketball, are we behind in S&C? How are we kind of, I know you said your brother works in Australia. They always say, like, obviously the professionals know, like, they have the top current stuff, and by the time the likes of me get it, it's old. It's they're already moved on to the next thing. Where is Ireland in that sort of S&C spot?
Yeah, do you know what? It's miles better. Even from when I always give the example, when I started out in my college degree, it was almost impossible to get a foam roller. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, God, right.
Like,
and now they're like, don't use foam rollers.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, that's it. Everything's very cyclical, but we will never catch up as a nation to places where they have really good high school systems, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've, you won't. There's a guy called Kelvin Flatt, who's the rugby strength coach or whatever, and he did this interesting thing about measuring all the combine numbers for the NFL.
Yeah.
and how much of an impact does that actually have on them who makes the Hall of Fame, who
Yeah.
has amazing careers? And very little. But
Really?
they are like
Okay.
entry level requirements to be able to play in the league, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
difference is between places like America, Canada, and maybe America is always the fourth leading best place to be when it comes to S&C, is that they have better performance cultures from an early age that set players up to meet those entry requirements, whereas we are always chasing our tail a little bit. Now, I haven't done a whole lot of work or have a whole lot of idea of what goes on in the four provinces in Ireland and
Yeah.
rugby, but that would be the closest to it for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I know what you're saying.
WGA for sure as well. They've got some stuff going on. Right.
But yeah, it's a professional environment, and even like there's other counties as well. Like you look around the country, and the facilities some of them have are just out of this world. Like, and it's amateurs playing at a professional level and training at a professional level, or maybe not professional, but very, very close to it. If
very
not
close to it, and that we'll never catch up as a country, but why not try? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But it comes to it being sustainable and reliable once again, and being able to pick coach. I remember when I took a job in just before I was coming to Canada, so maybe late 2018. And I was trying to set up a system within regional basketball in Munster about having an S&C coach to be at every training session that the regional squads were having together, so that I don't even know I should have been doing that, but I was anyway. I was trying to, I don't know, I was asked to do it by the person who was the head coach.
Okay.
I don't know what happened there. I don't know what my role was technically, but I was asked to do that, right? So I did it. And I couldn't really find anyone to commit to the time, because like no one could have really afford to, like if you're a college student, you can't get someone who's fully qualified S&C coach to work at a regional academy. You can't afford them. And if you're a college student, it has to be worth more of your time and money than it is to pay for your college, right? So if you can get a day job or in a bar or something at the weekend, which means that you can't be out at 8 a.m. on a basketball court on a Sunday morning, then that's where it drops down, right? And I finally got a person to come in and do some stuff, but then I actually end up myself just going and doing the majority of it, right? Because I felt invested in the project. And it wasn't very time efficient or cost effective for me. So it's not sustainable, it's not reliable. And that's why a high performance culture is very, very difficult to do. And we keep going back to basketball. You will always find people who will volunteer everywhere. But it's identifying your roles and are they good enough at their roles, to start making it, pushing it along, especially in S&C.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Looking back then, like to that time where you would have been coming out of college and getting involved maybe in that under 20 squad and other bits and pieces, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to be in your position now and they're just starting out on their own professional career?
Understand, get rich parents is what I would say. If I was going to say anything, I don't come from a lot of money, so all my friends who have the I shouldn't say that, but that's terrible, I should say. But like all my friends that have a lot of money to support them can go and do the internships, can go and spend the time in colleges in the States, and they can have a better career. If you don't, if you're a humble Joe or whatever, figure out how much you really, I shouldn't say this either, but figure out how much you really want it. Given that much time. So I gave from 2014 right through to 2019 wanting to work in high performance setups or high performing setups before I said, you know what, it's time to go make some money and set up a life for myself now. And then you have to take a step away. If it's something that's really important to you, you'll do it. It's like everything in life, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, right?
There you go.
So if it's really important to you, it won't actually be that much of an issue. But surround yourself, like get people to help you, right? We all do this thing where, especially I used to pick people up in like Tipperary. I drove up to Mead. I would go to, I went to Dundalk once to pick someone up to help me with fitness testing, because my mates are all going to do that for me anyway. They're all S&C coaches, right? Get yourself 2 coaches in the team. And I know that sounds a bit crazy because we're about to try to get one, but if you can get someone to help you and do a better service and then bounce off each other, it's going to be a lot better. And we all know that like every time you go to college, every time you go anywhere and a club asks you, there's probably some other coach around you that who lives close to you. You can jump in a car together, go to training, you can do the stats, everything on you together rather than on your own. That's going to give you, first of all, a fresher approach at all of it and give you someone to bounce ideas off, right? Now, that can go terribly wrong too. But I would say as well, they always say, know your worth, right? Know your worth. I almost disagree a little bit, to be honest. It's we're not really worth that much, right? Even at the highest level of sport, the S&C coach doesn't get anywhere near what the other coaches get, right? Because the proof, what do they say, the proof, like, well, no, I can't remember the thing of it, but what, success leaves clues, right?
Yeah,
So that's
like
what they
that.
say. Yeah. So if you're at the very highest level when the S&C coach isn't getting that much money, then realize that you're never going to make that much money at the lowest level in a team setup. You might in the private sector, and you'd be a really good coach, start your own gym and stuff like that, but realize that you have to put in hard work. Nobody's too good for hard work, and you have to sacrifice maybe what you think you're worth a little bit in order to, and that's maybe people thinking more financially. I actually don't think financially, or I think it's more time that you give, right? Obviously you might then revert that back to how much you're getting paid per hour or whatever. But it's a time you give more time than maybe you think you're worth. Or sorry, whatever way that works out. And you'll be a better coach for it. But don't have a chip on your shoulder because there's 50 other coaches coming out from that same year as you who will do something that you're not willing to do, and you won't get the job. So reduce your worth a little bit.
I know what you mean, and something that's kind of kept coming up throughout our chat, we've kind of talked about, but not indirectly, was having that team, like having that second coach, or having, like, for example, with a management team, you know your strengths and weaknesses. So what you're going to do is you're going to surround people that are their strengths are your weaknesses. And I'm going to give you a good quote from James Weldon. I was chatting to him there. He's Irish senior women's head coach. He was saying his dad always told him at a young age, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room at every aspect of the business. Surround yourself with as much quality people as you can. And that's kind of like, as the better support you have, the better network you have, the better you're going to be.
Many hands make light work, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Put together that puzzle and understand your roles, put together that puzzle, and it's going to make things a lot easier. But you have to pick wisely too, right? You have to pick wisely. But for sure. That's a great quote. James is a very intelligent man, eh?
Yeah, he is. I've had a couple of conversations with him over WhatsApp about a few different things. But is he
coming on the podcast? You're going to get him on?
I will. He's probably listening right now. He waiting for me to text him. No, I will eventually. James, if you're listening, I will get on to you soon. I want to ask a final question. Obviously not naming people, but if you were to kind of take all of your experience into account, team, individual, anything, what are those, as you said, success leaves clues, what are the common attributes or behaviours or values of the top elite talents or players?
This is a great question, and I love answering it by just saying being amazing at their sport, right? That's literally but like there's so much more to it. I always find it's the players, and you can say what an elite player or an elite athlete, right? So I work in the world of my work as athletes, right? It's not really anything to do with the skills, right? So for me, you probably have to ask a skills coach for what makes a top elite player. What makes a top elite athlete for me is the players that kind of, running that fine line between being extremely athletic, but also durable and able to tolerate load, right? So they can move faster, they can change direction really fast, they can produce forces, also jump high, but they can also sustain that over a period of time and not get injured. And I think that we go back to energy leaks and stuff like that and not being tired. I think that then in turn helps the ability to make effective and efficient decisions, right? You're not fatigued to no end because you'd be very inefficient with your energy as an athlete, which you see. But then that you could switch that around and you could go, well, they're being very efficient with their energy because they're making effective and efficient decisions because they're better at their sport. So it goes both ways. A big thing I would say, if there was any kind of, and I'm not one to give advice, I'm the most unathletic person in the world, honestly. I'm not one to haven't achieved anything in my life really, athletically. But focus on, people get too caught up on the marginal 1% gains when there's so many 10 to 15% gains to be made in your performance. And I think the best players do that, honestly. I think the best players, or the most, and I shouldn't say the word player because once again, it's not my realm. My realm is athletes. The best athletes always do that too. They might see that the weakest part of their thing is they have terrible sprint technique, where they might be very aerobic. So then that's up to the S&C coach to plan that, but the player still has to do it. And if you can get a 10% gain in what your sprint technique is, regardless of how much faster that makes you, does it make you less energy? I like the word energy leaks. I like the two words energy leak. Like you're not leaking energy as much.
Yeah, I like that as well. Yeah,
10% gains versus 1% gains, especially in Irish level. Don't get too caught up in the 1% things you can get when there's so many bigger things you can. I actually got that. I stole that a little bit from Andrew Gill. He's always said that to me. And it's funny talk about buy-in, the first thing Andrew Gill ever said to me, and Andrew's quite a close friend of mine now, and I've worked with him quite a bit. And we used to actually lecture together on the coaching battle to develop the coaching badges years ago. He said, "I don't believe in S&C in Irish basketball." And I was like, me a bit wet behind the ears, like a 19-year-old, what the fuck do you mean you don't believe in S&C in Irish basketball? But what he meant is like exactly what we're saying today, right? Yeah. Is it sustainable? Can you achieve it? Is it necessary? Well, if it's necessary and it's going to be done, it has to be done at a good level. Can you do that? And that's what he meant. It's not what he said. And if anyone's ever met Andy, will know that he doesn't always come across in the most precise way, you know. But yeah, and that's the only bit of advice. And I shouldn't give any advice. I'm the least athletic person in the world. But yeah.
No, I like that answer, and I'm going to give my 2 cents on it as well, even though I don't have the credentials to say it. But I think it's the top players as well. They recognise what their weaknesses are, and that's nearly the first step to it, because I've been guilty of as well. All you want to do is go out and, for example, if you're going for a kicking session or if you're going to shoot for basketball or whatever, you're going to go to your high percentage shots because you want to feel good about yourself. You want to be like, oh, this is great. The first step is, right, I'm really bad at dribbling my left hand or my right hand. God, I really need to work on that. And I think the top players have that, and they don't only just know what they're bad at, because everybody could know what they're bad at, but they go about it and make that weakness one of those weaknesses and kind of move it from that column of weaknesses to strengths.
Right. For sure. That's literally it. Yeah, that's exactly it, right? And you know, you just said you didn't have the credentials to say that. Well, you did, because you did say it, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what it is. And like, that's what I say, what I got earlier. Players know a lot, right? They know an awful lot. They know a lot what goes on, right? And now you're a coach as well now, right? But yeah, they're the ones who are playing the sport. And I know that kind of contradicts what we said earlier about when you're injured and you see more. It's both sides to it, right?
Yeah,
it's both sides to it for sure.
Yeah, and even the credentials, sometimes, as you said, you could have all the credentials, but sometimes, let's say if you're on the side of the pitch or the court, if you have all those pieces of paper, the best thing you can do, you know what I mean? It doesn't really matter. You can rip them up. It doesn't matter. If you can't get the message to your team, who cares if you're level 20, whatever coaching course or whatever badge you have, like, it doesn't really matter.
Means show, it means nothing, for sure.
Yeah, so we're going to move on to sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions for every guest. Question 1 is, what is your favourite quote?
So I'm cheating a little bit. I have 2 favourite quotes, right?
Oh, it's all right.
One is a very new one. One is, I don't know if I did a friend of mine who's a really good sales coach. He said, a business without sales is just a hobby. And I was like, you're dead right. I was like, and it's a good thing for coaches to hear. Yeah. You can have the best Instagram. You can have the most, it looks great. You're ripped. You do really good, interesting exercises. But if you're not changing that to money, then you're not building a career for yourself. You're just having a hobby of, your hobby is the thing you got your degree in, right? Which it shouldn't be, right? Your career should be what you got your degree in for the most part. And that's from a coach's perspective. And then the second one is, I'm a big MMA fan. I'm a big Michael Bisping fan. You probably have no idea who that is, but he's a fighter from Manchester. And when he was he's a bit of a, he had one of the toughest roads to a world title you ever see, and end up losing one eye and all this stuff. But I've always been very interested in what his coach did to change him later in his career to make him more effective. And one of the things he says is it takes confidence to take a day off. Right.
So I'm gonna rock that as well.
Yeah, take it. Yeah. It's really important because it encompasses everything, right? In any aspect of life. But for a player, you have to have some confidence to be able to take that rest day. We talked about earlier, players only generally want to overwork. And so then you have to build that psychological aspect of it as well as the physical aspect. So they're my 2. I know it's cheating to have 2. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I'll take it. No problem. Okay. I love a good quote. But and that's something that I remember hearing it was a couple of years ago. I don't know if you know him, Devin Williams. He does, if there's someone listening who's big into basketball, they probably know he does that series 10,000 hours. Really interesting. And I remember it's funny because he's a basketball trainer now, but he started off just randomly in a local gym or whatever, and 2 kids came up and they were like, will you train us or whatever? And he was all about hard work, and they did 3 a days and all this stuff. And he then he said it himself, like he's developed and learned and loads of stuff, but he had it up, I think it was a story or video, and it doesn't matter, and he was saying sometimes working hard is having a rest day and doing your icing and doing your different things and doing your journaling and not being up doing 3 a days at running hills and running yourself ragged.
For sure. Yeah, it's so true. There's so many players and so many people. Look at I hate to use Tiger as an example of what he was doing to himself with his marine training and the effect it's had in his career. And obviously, the effect of the car crash on him had him 2 weeks. So it's probably way more dramatic, right? But there is players that, it takes confidence to take a day off for sure.
Yeah, I like that one. Question 2, best sporting event you've been to?
Yeah, so growing up, I'm a Millwall football club fan. I don't know if you know Millwall. They're a second division team in England.
No.
Anyone who's ever known anything about hooliganism will know about Millwall. And
Okay.
I'm obviously an English soccer fan. So hasn't been a whole lot of sporting events that I've been to that have been amazing.
Okay.
And I'll go back to, I was very young. I was only 9 years old at the time. And I went to the FA Cup semi-final. It was on in Old Trafford at the time because Wembley was being rebuilt and we played Sunderland. And I don't know if you know anything about soccer, but
I know a little bit about that. Yeah,
Tim Cahill scored for Millwall. He went on to play for Everton and have every record in the book as an Australian soccer player. And it's the only time, that's probably just says more to my choice of teams that I support. That is the only really positive event that I've ever been to. So it was an easy enough choice, to be honest. And then we went on to get smashed by Man United 3-0 in the final. And it was one of them coming out.
It was short-lived.
Cristiano Ronaldo's first season. And I was like, it's not great. Yeah,
that's great. No, that's good. Biggest setback or challenge so far in your career?
It's got to be COVID. It's got
really
to be, right. Yeah. Because everything else is minute in the fact of the world shutting down and you can't work. You know what I mean? Like, especially we were hitting really good momentum with our business over here just before it all happened, and I had just been promoted into the role that I'm in now, which was, it was a nice thing to be part of, and things were going well. Closes down, and then the reopening and reclosing of gyms and facilities and stuff like that is one of the most stressful times of my life. I swear to God. The amount of work that goes in to keep something open, and then I remember there was one time here in November they let us open for 1 week and then shut us down again when the cases didn't even move. So it was like they just were trying to do something. And I remember the amount of work that me and the owner of the business put into getting, you think about 2,000 members at our facility, right? Each one of them have a different payment date you now need to move. 90 something training clients, whatever, all have payment dates. The amount of work and talking to people and all this kind of stuff for 5 days. We hired new staff because they had to be supervised, and they shut us down. They opened us on the Monday, shut us on the Friday. And I'd say it, it's almost like a challenge. I think challenge is the wrong word because we have no real control over it. It's a setback. Right. The challenge will be when we finally get the reopen consistently. So I would say it's more of a setback than an actual challenge, if that makes sense. Yeah, no,
I like the way you put that. That was interesting. Out of interest, actually, I don't really know what's been going on in Canada. I know with Ireland, it's sort of similar. Like they're opening and shutting now. It wasn't within 5 days that they were opening and shutting. But talk us through the timeline of the gyms over there. What have they been kind of saying to you? Or since March, really, what have the openings kind of been like?
So we closed on March 17th, which was or 16th, whatever it was, the same as everyone around the world last year. We then reopened on August 4th. So that was a 5 month stint. Then reclosed us on October 10th. Reclosed it, and I know these off the top of my head, right? We're doing some paperwork about it, right? And we were allowed to do some one-on-one training for a little bit, like just PT or like just rehab stuff. And then they opened us, I think it was November 11th, and closed us on November 16th, and we've been closed since. Now we have a physiotherapy department with me and a guy actually from Galway. I should give him a shout out, James. James, because we both have master's degrees, we can do some physiotherapy work over here and be involved in that world. So it's kind of we're doing that right now, but that is all we can do. Literally, there's nothing else, and no end in sight right now. So
kind of on the flip side, then a bit more positive. Your biggest achievement on or off? I have court written, but I don't know, like for S&C outside the gym, maybe.
I saw that. Right? Yeah. Do you know what? I think achievements are a really weird thing, right? I don't know if that's like always being involved in sport. Like an achievement would be winning European championships or winning whatever, because that's actually you're achieving something, right? In my head, and I may be super pessimistic and super self-critical, right? but I definitely am, to be fair. But like I'm proud of like certain things in my career, but I don't necessarily see them as achievements. And as I said earlier, I'm physically useless, right? So but the stuff like I think achievements, like I said, I think they're weird. There's stuff that I'm proud of. I was very happy to be coaching 2 Irish Underage age female teams at 21 years of age, right? Was I ready to do it? Probably not, but I was glad I was doing it. I'm excited about the podcast that I run. I'm glad that gets traction and people like that. But achievements, I once won a silver medal playing soccer for LIT in my final year of college. That's probably the highest I ever got.
We'll put that one down. But I'm interested to hear, I like the way you kind of said achievement there. And do you have a particular definition of success then? Because
no, I do not. No. I think success is relative, right? Like, I do not. And that you could talk, people use different things to intrinsically motivate themselves, right? I don't really even think too much extrinsic motivation exists. I think it's all inside your own brain, whether you want to do something or not do something, right? So for me, success would only be probably when I'm looking back in 25 years time, but then that's just talking about me, right? I mean, if you are saying what was that season successful, well, what was your key performance indicators, or what was your objectives at the start of it? Did you meet them? That's the definition of success in that kind of sporting world. But for me, but that's just because I live in a world of athletic development, which isn't as black and white as winning and losing a game, right?
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Maybe that's
what we like
to tell ourselves, you know?
Yeah, that's it. Would it be different now? Like, for example, if I had James Weldon on, he could give me, like, I don't know what he's going to say, but he could maybe give a more definitive answer because, well, I don't know what he does, but, like, you know what I mean? Because he's a coach, there's more winning and losing with a team rather than developing them in terms of S&C and stuff. Looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
I probably wouldn't, in relation to my career, probably nothing. Probably just do whatever you do, because at 18 I didn't know anything anyway, and I was just but what I would say is I would just party more at college. I'd have more fun, and anyone who knows me knows I partied an awful lot, to be honest. But I would go back and enjoy it, because now that I'm getting older and I'm only 25, but partying is changing a little bit. I miss my mates, and there's
no parties with COVID anyway.
No parties with COVID, I'll tell you that. Jesus. And then fake it until you make it, right? I think one of my lecturers said that to me when I was about 20 years old, when I was starting to get somewhere in traction in basketball. He said, fake it. Like, if you don't know, act the bravado and don't let them know you don't know, but then be willing to have the chat with them in private, right? Or whatever. I would say just be it's easy to say that though, right? It's easy to say, have more confidence in the way you do things, but you only gain that confidence from doing those things and learning from them. So, advice to party more. That's the only advice I give to my 18.
Party more. That's a good one. That's going to look really good when I do the show notes for this. Just party more.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Dream dinner guest and why?
So this was the hardest one I had, right? Because a dinner guest, I don't know, right? I actually don't know. What I would like to do is, and this is a terrible lead on from the party more, I would like to meet someone like Paul Gascoigne, George Best, Diego Maradona, and go on a 3-day bender with them and find out what people are actually like. Do you know what I mean? Like, rather than sitting there with like an after dinner speaker prepped kind of guy who's going to give you a little bit of I want to go out, I want to have some fun, I want to see what people were actually like and find out some real stories. So if I was going to pick one of them, obviously I'm English, I'd have to go Gaza, and probably not the best person to be associating yourself with, right? But that's why I've gone.
Right, I might change the question now. Who would you go on a 3-day bender with instead of go to dinner?
You'll probably get like a more interesting answer, right? You know what I mean?
God,
it's like the one that I struggle with the most. It's like, I don't know if I want to sit down and have a dinner with someone who's probably not going to tell me all the truth anyway, right? And that's my cynical mindset. But if we go out and have some beers and have some fun and get one of these loose cannons, so I'm always interested about the best players who can go against the grain, right? Can party, can do it all, and still George Best, Paul Gascoigne. Now, it doesn't last, but I'm always interested in what it was like in those years, right? So that's probably what it would be. Maybe not the answer you were thinking of, but I'm sorry.
No. A final question then, and I have a feeling you're going to give me a different sort of answer to this one again. But if your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
Yeah, I had to ask a couple of friends about this.
It stumps everybody. I'm considering nearly getting rid of it because nobody has an answer.
It's great. No, it's a great question. I have a lot of friends who work in film and stuff over here, because Toronto's quite a big film place, and I was asking them, and they were, do you know what someone gave me a really, really good, and once again, you asked me the question, I asked someone else, so is it my answer? I don't know. But avoiding stagnation, right? The whole world is standing still, and I'm trying so hard to not stand still with it. So that's the way I would look at it, right? It's like trying to set myself aside and do something that's at least positive and productive in this time when it's very hard to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. The podcast is a great example. I have to say, I might rob that for my title, because I'm avoiding stagnation because I'm doing a podcast. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
I'm learning.
right.
Well, I'm trying to learn from different people.
Try
Yeah.
to. Well, that's my whole podcast.
No, I more
right?
meant. No, I didn't mean for you. I just meant, I don't know if people are giving me great learnings, but I don't know if I'm taking it in enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
But no, that's a good answer. I like that. And I have to say, I didn't come up with that question, so full credit to the podcast I stole it from, because it wasn't mine. So you can take it as well if you want.
Yeah, for sure will.
Oh, but look, Daniel, thank you so much for your time. Jeez, we're going on an hour and 40 minutes here.
No, that's no problem. That's no problem.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I'll be sure to link everything in the description, your podcast, your page, and
perfect.
Yeah, just thanks for coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. We'll flip it around soon. We'll get you on my one. We'll really go into depths about, take you out of the host seat and put you in the hot seat.
We'll see. We were chatting about that the other day. You're putting me under pressure now.
I said I mentioned it, right?
Oh, but look, yeah, Daniel, look, thank you so much, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
No problem. Look after yourself, all right?
A massive thank you to Daniel for coming on today. There will be links to his social media and his podcast in the description box below. Let me know over on Instagram your definition of high performance and who you would like to hear from. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you did enjoy the episode, be sure to leave a rating and a review. If you're interested in starting up your own podcast, be sure to get in touch with the Primal Productions team over on Instagram @PrimalPro.